So I wanted to do something a little bit different this week with this video. Obviously, I did write a full 7-round mock draft in terms of what I think the Chargers would do. I do believe they will take Jordan Addison at 21 if I had to bet right now. But instead of doing a full 3, 5, 7-round mock draft right now regarding what I think they'll do, I wanted to play a little bit of a game of alternate scenarios here, because obviously there's a name that everyone likes at 21 for the Chargers, whether that's Bijan or Addison or any of the wide receivers, Zay Flowers, Michael Mayer, Brian Branch, and just sort of play out different possibilities on the draft board based on what you do in round 1 and how that opens the board in rounds 2 and 3 on day 2. And so I wanted to do kind of that experiment, see which mocks you guys like the best. For the sake of just talking about different stuff in this video, once I do take a prospect in one mock, I'm probably not going to take him in the other, just to create conversation and see which guys, people like, which guys people don't. You guys can tell me which one was your favorite mock draft in the comments down below once we do them, of course, and tell me what you would do in a 3-round Chargers mock right now if you had to. But yeah, leave a like, subscribe as well. But let's get right into it. So I do have the PFF mock draft simulator pulled up. For the purposes of this exercise, like I said, we'll be doing 3-round mock drafts, kind of rapid fire style, trying to talk about, the prospects in round 1, sort of the most, and then what they do in round 2 and 3 as a result. I would do a full 7-round mock draft for each prospect. However, that would take 3 hours, and my my creative partners have told me that's not a great idea. Also, I don't necessarily have the time. But without any further ado, I guess let's get right into it. So I do kind of want to start off this mock by what I just said a couple minutes ago. Right now, I do believe the Chargers' man of the moment is wide receiver Jordan Addison out of USC. I have my kind of mixed thoughts on him as a prospect, but obviously there are the local connections. He's had a top 30 visit with the team. Chris Beatty is the wide receiver coach who did recruit him at Pittsburgh. Does have a differentiation from what the Chargers have typically liked in their, size for their wide receivers, but also does fit the mold of a route running, Keenan Allen type technician that the Chargers have liked in terms of that methodical route runner prospect before. They're not averse to that. So right now, if I do have to bet, I do think Jordan Addison kind of is the pick at 21. So let's build a mock draft around Jordan Addison and see kind of what options fall to us on the board here. Now that we did go wide receiver in round 1, you're obviously not going to go wide receiver in round 2. To be honest, I think wide receiver in round 2 isn't necessarily the best value right now. I think if you do pass on a wide receiver in round 1, it actually would be kind of round 3. That is the best receiver kind of area right now. But yeah, so let's see kind of what prospects we have on the board right now. You could go tight end and go Luke Musgrave here if you want. I do think he is a pretty terrific athlete, but is a little bit unrefined at the moment. You go Tuli Tuipulotu, who was at one point getting first-round buzz. I think Mel Kiper, in his first mock draft a couple months ago, actually picked him to go 21 to the Chargers. I think the hype on that has kind of cooled a little bit. You go cornerback like Garrett Williams. Garrett Williams, though, does have the ACL injury, so he'll be out a year. You could go Trey Hodges-Tomlinson here. Of course, it's important to note that Tomlinson is he is LT's nephew, actually, and, LT is an employee of the team, so that's going to be one to watch out for there. But I will actually do what I did in my 7-round Bolt Beat mock draft, and I will take cornerback Julius Brents to supplement the Jordan Addison pick. You can go tight end here. I actually have a value that I like more a little bit later. But Julius Brents is the perfect Brandon Staley, system corner. If you're trying to talk about replacing Michael Davis in a year or even replacing J.C. Jackson, depending on what happens, he's 6'3", he's big, he has really fluid movements, can play, outside, can play in the slot. I just think he has incredible movement ability for his size, and I think that is what kind of this defense needs out of a true cornerback 1 going into the future. I also think of the cornerbacks that are left on the board at this point, including Hodges Tomlinson, who I just discussed, as well as some of the other names, DJ Turner, Garrett Williams, who, I think has CB1 potential, but is probably going to be out for the year. Tyreek Stevenson, a lot of people like him as sort of like your poor man's Joey Porter Jr. if you want to get him in round 2. But Brents is personally my favorite corner in terms of projecting him to be a potential future CB1 type of guy. I do think that's Julius Brents more than it is any of these other guys on the board. And the value fits out, right? His average draft position is 54.5. His rank is 51, on PFF's big board, and we're taking him at 54. So ultimately, the value pans out. I like the Julius Brents pick quite a bit as a corner. To me, that's the best value in that round. So now that we have our wide receiver, we have our corner pick for the future of the Brandon Staley defense. A lot of ways that we can go in round 3. I'm very tempted to go running back because I love Kendre Miller and I love Tyjae Spears. But maybe we'll save them for one of these other alternate mock drafts we're doing. For the purposes of this mock draft, I'm actually going to do what I did in my Bolt Beat mock draft again and take Luke Schoonmaker. I do think Luke Schoonmaker is a really smart pick here, and the more that I have consistently thought about Schoonmaker, I think he's kind of the dream Kellen Moore corner. The way that I would describe Schoonmaker is that, if you ask for something in the car and then your mom says that, no, we have that at home. Luke Schoonmaker is kind of the Dalton Schultz that is at home in this draft. He's 6'6", great inline blocker, and also is a very good red zone threat, which I think plays well to a Kellen Moore scheme, can be used in a lot of 12 personnel type sets too. I don't know why PFF is giving him an F grade. PFF's grading is an F, to be honest. They have Marvin Mims. If you ever take Marvin Mims in the second round, they act like it's a war crime. So, I do have Jordan Addison, Julius Brents, and Luke Schoonmaker in this first mock. So let me know what you guys think about that one. But next, I do want to do something different now. I hope the mock draft simulator works with me here. I want to do the mock draft that everybody wants me to do next in these first 3 rounds, and that is, in fact, take Texas running back Bijan Robinson. So hopefully he is available. He is available in this PFF simulation now. For the real in terms of what I think here, I don't think Bijan will be available in round 1 by the time the Chargers are up on the board. I think they'd have to trade up for him, which would be a mistake in my opinion, to sacrifice capital for a running back. But let's pretend Bijan is available. So I'm going to take Bijan. And PFF also, this is the thing with their grading. They give you like a D+ for taking Bijan Robinson at 21, which to me is ridiculous. But anyway, I will take the running back Bijan Robinson there. To me, it's pretty simple. He is the best running back in this draft. I think he's the best running back to come out of college since Ezekiel Elliott. And, ultimately you're getting a blue chip prospect. I know there's concern, of course, if drafting a running back, you're probably not going to sign that guy to a second deal. And that's a deal breaker for a lot of people when it comes to the pick. But for me, the value that you would be getting out of these peak Herbert years on his contract, I think Bijan is an absolute weapon of a pick there. So now that we've taken Bijan Robinson, we have a lot of different ways that we can go in round 2. Since we just took Julius Brents, I don't necessarily want to take a corner. This is incredible value. BJ Ojulari is on the board. Obviously, it was, of course, the younger brother of Azeez Ojulari. A little small in terms of his playing size right now, but man, you could see him in the perfect 3-4 edge rushing scheme, and this guy is going to be a baller in my opinion. I had never necessarily did like an edge rankings, but Bijan, we're taking Bijan and BJ, but BJ Ojulari to me is a real first round prospect. And I think because of his size and because of some other factors, he's getting a little underrated now in terms of the draft. So if BJ Ojulari was really there at 54, sure, I would take him. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think he's going to be. So I am kind of going to pass on that pick just because I am trying to be a little bit more realistic about these things. I don't think he falls all the way to 54. Isaiah Foskey actually went the pick before, and that is kind of like who I was planning on picking in terms of picking like an edge player. So let's go a little bit different here. I'm going to go with Siaki Ika, obviously the nose tackle out of Baylor. there are weight concerns. There are down-to-down concerns in terms of how many downs he actually plays, particularly in a Brandon Staley defense. And I know we have Sebastian Joseph day 2. It isn't necessarily the, best fit in terms of a draft pick, but I think he's a really great player in terms of value in round 2. And the Chargers just need to beef up the defensive interior in general by whichever way they get it, whether it's a nose tackle, whether it's a more tweener pass rusher, whether it's, someone who has a little bit more bulk to them but isn't quite a nose tackle, whatever form it comes in, they need help on the interior. And so I'll take Siaki Ika for the value that you ultimately get from there. No, I'm not. I would round 3 pick. Let's see what else we can do here just to talk about different prospects. I've already taken running back. I've taken defensive tackle Siaki Ika. I think people know what I want to do with this next pick, and let's see if he is indeed on the board, or did he already go? I was going to look up Marvin Mims went already, but he might have already went. Let's do a quick search just because I want to still take him. Oh, no, Marvin Mims is available. I keep forgetting he's ridiculously low on the PFF mock draft simulator. He's at 109, average draft position 87.2. Chargers get him at 85 here. I, for the life of me, still don't understand why Marvin Mims is talked about as a round 3 type prospect. To me, he's a round 2 prospect all day. I have him as my 4th ranked receiver in my top 10. And as I've continuously said, if Oklahoma's offense was not dog water, he would not be going this low. To me, he has, the most potential out of some of these guys later on in the draft. So PFF hated this fucking mock draft. I did, I guess. I did take Siaki Ika, which I thought was okay value. Of course, if you take a running back in the first round, that's not great value, and it's 6 spots over what PFF has them on their big board. I don't understand why Bijan's so low on the PFF big board. I get why, in terms of positional value, he wouldn't go super high. But I've seen Bijan on big boards continuously, like in the top 5. Like, he is a blue chip prospect. It's just a matter of where he's actually going to go in terms of draft order. But this was an experiment with Bijan. I ultimately think if you do take somebody like Bijan Robinson as a running back in the first round, or even maybe a Jahmyr Gibbs in the second round, what the Chargers probably do after that point is kind of, I think your 3rd round pick probably needs to be an offensive player. And then, whether that's a Marvin Mims or like a Luke Schoonmaker as previously discussed. But so this is how this simulation played out for me in terms of drafting Bijan Robinson. Obviously, a lot of different things you could do. But let's go with a different route here again next. We've talked about 2 offensive picks so far. Let's go with a defensive pick in Alabama's Brian Branch, who obviously I think Steven and Tyler are very high on. I'm pretty high on Brian Branch too, just maybe not so much in the first round because more of a slot corner value at this point. I do think you can kind of wait to take your cornerback, as I've said before. And I wouldn't necessarily be in love with the pick, but let's see what we can build around Brian Branch, who again is super versatile, has size, and is a really good athlete based on the tape. I know he didn't necessarily test super well, but if you ever watch Alabama tape and him playing in the slot or blitzing and coming off, he plays like his hair is on fire and would obviously fit very well on this Chargers team. So now that we've taken Brian Branch, what do we do in round 2? I think the value here is kind of tight end at this point based on how, the board sort of fell to us. Sam Laporta is still available. I have Sam Laporta graded, I think, is my tight end 3, tight end 4. And so if you get him at this point in the draft, and as I said, PFF kind of considers this an upset. He's ranked 43rd, still available on the board at 54. I'll take Sam Laporta for the hell of it. I do think he is kind of a tight end that Kellen Moore would like to work with. Obviously, big receiving threat and still a pretty solid blocker for what he is as well. So let's take him. And then, based on how we've already played it out here, I've already talked about Luke Schoonmaker. For running back, now that we have taken a safety first round, I think you could go wide receiver here. I could keep pressing the Marvin Mims button again. It's one of my favorite buttons to press. But for the sake of it, Steven did go Tyjae Spears in a mock draft a couple weeks ago, and I think that pick could make a lot of sense based on, a true need to maybe eventually replace Austin Eckler. I also think Kendre Miller, the running back out of TCU, could make a lot of sense here. Has sort of the proper size that you would want in a running back too, versus if you kind of keep waiting for a running back here, a lot of the guys in rounds 4 through 7 are a little bit smaller than like what you would kind of prototypically like in a running back one. Granted, Austin Eckler is 2, but he's also strong pound for pound, one of the like stronger players, for his size. So for the sake of mixing it up, since Steven took Tyjae Spears in our mock draft, I will take TCU's Kendre Miller, who I think showed a lot at TCU this season in terms of how he can be used kind of as a receiving threat of the backfield. I think he is versatile enough and runs inside the tackles well enough too to potentially play a significant role on the team this year. So I'll take Kendre Miller at 85. And let's see how PFF likes this one. Like most things I do, I'm sure they'll hate it. But they give the Kendre Miller pick a D. Awesome. But they did like the Brian Branch pick, and they did like the Laporta pick in terms of value. So this is just how this simulation went. I think if they do go defense in round 1, whether that's edge, whether that's corner, whether that's safety, there will be a true emphasis on going offense in rounds 2 and 3, just because I think that is where the value is. In this simulation, just to be different, I didn't take somebody like Marvin Mims or go for a round 3 receiver. But, in actuality, instead of taking Kendre Miller, that is probably what they would do. And it kind of does depend on if you go wide receiver or tight end in round 2 as well. Sort of for me, I think the cutoff for taking a tight end is, in terms of like an impact guy immediately, is Schoonmaker. And then once you go below Schoonmaker in terms of like round 4, round 7, day 3 guys, you're probably talking about guys that aren't having as much of an instant impact on the field, more in like a Trey McKitty 2021 draft type of vein, in terms of it takes them a little bit of time to get acclimated. And well, Trey McKitty hasn't necessarily gotten acclimated yet, but I digress. Let's see what else we can do. We've taken running back, we've taken wide receiver, we've gone with a defensive pick in Brian Branch. So let's talk about some of the other names that Chargers fans have liked. I do think there are some, you could go with an edge player like Will McDonald here. Myles Murphy is still on the board, although he's kind of rocketed up the last few weeks. If the Chargers were to get Myles Murphy, I do think that he is too much of like a freak athlete to kind of pass up at this point. Whether you're playing him at the edge, whether you end up playing him inside, whatever it is. I do think there's going to be a team that kind of bets on his traits, even though he hasn't necessarily had that like super great college production to back it up. But for the sake of argument, let's take Myles Murphy, the edge defender out of Clemson, with our 21st overall pick. So now we've gone edge, have kind of fortified that. I do think, for what it's worth, Murphy probably is your rotation edge 3 piece this season, and then you hope that, next season when they probably have to part ways with one of Bosa or Khalil Mack, that he kind of, makes that jump that you would want to see. Let's see what we can do in round 2. A lot of possibilities on the board here. But for the sake of argument, I do think that you could go with someone like Luke Whippler, who obviously is a center. I mean, we've talked about trying to find like the Corey Linsley replacement. I do think this is probably still a little too high to like go full out and go get the Corey Linsley potential replacement after this season or after the next 2 years, given the knee injuries he's suffering from. But yeah, I wouldn't quite do it or pull the trigger at this point in the mock. But now that we've gone Myles Murphy, we do have some options. I think now I'm scrolling a little bit too far just because there isn't necessarily a fit I love that I haven't talked about. For the sake of conversation, let's go with Nathaniel Tank Dell out of Houston. I'm not in love with Tank Dell just as a prospect. I think that he is a little too limited size-wise, and as much as we talk about like Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison potentially being size outliers, I think that Tank Dell kind of is too. I mean, he's 5'8", 165. So that's kind of hard to buy as an NFL prospect. Not to mention, I think he's kind of more like a shiftiness guy, like in terms of the open field after he gets the ball, than he is good as a route runner. So that's why I haven't personally been in love with Tank Dell. And it's kind of like, if you really want to take Tank Dell in round 2, I would rather just take Marvin Mims in round 3. That's how I've sort of viewed the situation. But for the sake of conversation, let's take Tank Dell. I know he has a lot of fans out there, so maybe there will be a lot of people who do like that draft pick in particular. And now that we have taken somebody like Tank Dell, we can sort of, get a little bit freaky here in round 3. We don't need a wide receiver as much, but, there are some of these guys that I do think, round 3 is where I think the positional rankings start to get a little wonky. I like Garrett Williams out of Syracuse a lot. Now, the problem with Garrett Williams is that he may not play this season. Obviously tore his ACL in 2022. Otherwise, we're probably talking about him as though he's one of the top corners in this class. And it is unfortunate what happened. For the sake of it, though, I do think his talent and just how aggressive he is as a player, it does deserve to be, commended for the season that he, ultimately has, or the productions he's ultimately put on at Syracuse. Has a lot of elite, kind of footwork and quickness, and is above average player. There's some cornerbacks that you have that you sort of like can't coach mentality out of. And I do think Garrett Williams is sort of one of those players that like does have that dog in him at corner, as much as that phrase is overused. Now, the one thing is that you probably have to wait a little bit for somebody like Garrett Williams to see the field. Now, is that doable with J.C. Jackson potentially not starting the season, Michael Davis being in the last year of his contract as previously mentioned? I don't know. But in terms of talent, I think Garrett Williams is pretty good value for 85. So that one is probably going to depend on what the Chargers see in terms of their medicals, in terms of what they like. Do they like the player enough to wait with him through that ACL injury and do their medicals check out? But, that's a way that the Chargers could end up going. All right. We do have, I think, time for maybe one more of these mock drafts. Like I said, I would do this experiment all day. However, I don't necessarily have the time. We have gone tight end. We've gone wide receiver. We've gone running back. We have gone edge. We've gone safety / corner with Brian Branch, really. So let's make it fun. I'll give the people what they want and take Zay Flowers at 21. I know Brett Coleman and a lot of other people have liked the idea of Zay Flowers going to the Chargers, even though I'm not as big of a fan of him. Obviously, he would add a lot to your offense. So let's take Zay Flowers at 21 for the sake of it. And now that we have taken sort of a smaller wide receiver in the first round who is an outlier for Tom Telesco's size, or size needs, I guess I should say, I do wonder if they take Zay Flowers, is it more likely they probably take a tight end a little bit earlier in the second round, not kind of to compensate for the size thing, but also because they might feel that they need a more immediate weapon that can contribute, right? Zay Flowers probably starts you the season as your wide receiver 3, your wide receiver 4, versus, if you take someone like Tucker Kraft out of South Dakota State, excuse me, kind of comes from the school that, obviously produced Dallas Goedert and some of these other, tight end prospects. Tucker Kraft is kind of your like carbon copy of what Hunter Henry was coming out of college. And so for me, this is sort of the perfect pick. He is a really good, blocker who actually has really great movement for his size. And so if they wanted to go Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State, go watch the tape. I think that he is a pretty, fantastic player that we don't necessarily talk about as much as we talk about Laporta or Schoonmaker or some of these other guys, but Tucker Kraft is pretty solid in my opinion. So if you want to take Zay Flowers and you kind of want your big, not just blocking tight end, but also kind of graceful mover as a tight end too. And he sort of plays with Gerald Everett this season and then maybe takes over as the full-time tight end one next year. I do think Tucker Kraft could potentially be your guy. But yeah, now that we are in round 3, let's just kind of do something interesting. Obviously, we took Zay Flowers, so no need for a wide receiver. A lot of different ways. Of course, they could go here. And, for the sake of it, I do know there are a lot of people that like the player. I'm not as big of a fan as Zach Charbonnet at the pro level, just because I do think that he is a little bit limited in terms of what he is, right? But he is fluid in his movements, right? I don't think he's going to be a running back that puts up a ton of production, like receiving out of the backfield, for example. But I think with his, overall size and what he is as a runner, you can pretty much rely on him to safely be the bell cow of your offense. And obviously plays at UCLA, the school where they drafted Joshua Kelly a few years ago, are probably enough local connections to kind of make that one work. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers were interested in somebody like Charbonnet to kind of carry their offense a little bit in terms of the load. And look, he's supposed to be gone by this point in the board. It's good value for pick 85 here. I don't necessarily know if in actuality Charbonnet will be there. I know in some of these simulations he's there, some of these simulations he's not. So let's see what we got. We did get Zay Flowers, Tucker Kraft, and Zach Charbonnet. So I meant to take a defensive guy, but this is sort of your all offense mock draft that I just did. So I hope I didn't cook up too many war crimes here today, but you guys can let me know in the comments down below which one was your favorite mock draft. Tried to, kind of think this thing through my experimentation and the guys that I like. But let me know who you're thinking about in round 1, and let me know what your example of a 3-round mock draft would be with guys like Bijan and Addison, or even Quentin Johnston, who we didn't touch on today, Zay Flowers, Brian Branch, the whole gambit. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys next time on Bolt Breakdowns.